The coins came out slowly. Nathaniel Mercer stood third in line at the checkout lane of a Walmart on the outskirts of Columbus, Ohio, wearing a gray canvas jacket that had belonged to his father and holding a single box of oatmeal. He was not supposed to be here. He had a driver, a personal shopper, an assistant who handled every errand with a single text. But today was October 14th, and on October 14th every year, he drove himself back to the neighborhood where he grew up and walked the aisles of this particular store because his mother once did. The woman in front of him had placed 3 small plastic bags on the counter and was carefully pouring their contents, quarters, dimes, nickels, into a trembling pile in front of the cashier. The line behind her shifted. Someone exhaled loudly. She kept her eyes down. Nathaniel glanced at the belt. Cereal, bread, peanut butter, children's cough syrup, a small bag of apples, 2 pairs of socks child-sized, a composition notebook, 1 box of crayons. Nothing for her. Not a single item in that cart had been chosen for the woman standing there. Nathaniel stopped breathing. If stories like this are the kind that stay with you, the quiet ones, the ones about ordinary people carrying more than anyone sees, consider subscribing to the channel. We tell these stories every week, and we'd love for you to be part of the community that keeps them going. Nathaniel Mercer was 46 years old and worth more than most small countries. He owned a lakeside estate outside Columbus, a penthouse office on the 31st floor of the Mercer Freight Systems Tower, and a fleet of vehicles he rarely drove himself. The financial press described him in predictable terms: disciplined, visionary, coldly effective. He did not attend charity galas. He did not give interviews about his childhood. He did not speak publicly about anything that could not be measured in quarterly returns. What the press did not know, what almost no one knew, was that Nathaniel had grown up 40 minutes from that Walmart in a 2-bedroom rental that smelled like damp carpet and old radiator heat. His mother, Evelyn Mercer, had worked 2 jobs for most of his childhood: a daytime cleaning shift at a medical office and a late-night position at a diner 2 miles from their apartment. She was a small woman with large hands and the particular kind of exhaustion that never fully lifted, even on her days off. She never complained. She never asked for anything. On the nights she came home from the diner, she would check on Nathaniel while he pretended to sleep, and he would hear her in the kitchen afterward, eating whatever was left, usually not much. Evelyn Mercer died of a heart attack at 59, 14 months before her son's company went public. She never saw the tower with his name on it. She never sat in the lakeside house. Nathaniel had been trying to do something useful with that fact ever since, and mostly failing. Claire Bennett was 31 years old and running on 4 hours of sleep. She had grown up wanting to be a nurse, not the hospital kind, but the community kind. The one who drove to homes in low-income neighborhoods and caught the infections and the warning signs before they became emergencies. She had been 2 semesters from finishing her nursing program at Columbus State when her marriage ended. Her husband, Derek, left without much explanation and without forwarding his share of the rent. He also left without providing any of the child support he had agreed to in writing. That had been 3 years ago. Claire had not returned to school. She was raising Oliver, 8, and Lily, 5, on a part-time administrative salary from a chiropractic office that did not offer benefits. Oliver was old enough to understand that the family had a budget. He understood it with a seriousness that broke Claire's heart regularly, the way he would study a menu in a restaurant and always choose the cheapest thing, the way he would say, "I don't need that," before she even had a chance to say she couldn't afford it. Lily did not yet understand. Lily still pointed at things. On the morning of October 14th, Claire had counted out the coins from 3 separate containers: a mason jar, a ceramic mug with a broken handle, and a Ziploc bag she kept in her winter coat pocket. She had rolled them the night before, then unrolled them again when she realized the paper sleeves would slow down the checkout. She had added up the items in her head twice before entering the store. She knew what she could afford. She had given herself an extra $4 for the crayons because Oliver's teacher had sent home a note asking students to bring a fresh set, and she had been carrying that note in her purse for 11 days. She did not buy herself anything. She had not planned to. Every year on October 14th, Nathaniel followed the same quiet ritual. He left his phone at the office, put on the old gray jacket, and drove his least conspicuous car, a dark blue sedan he kept for no particular reason, back to the neighborhood on the west side of Columbus, where he and Evelyn had rented their apartment. He stopped at the cemetery on Maplewood Road for 20 minutes. He set a small bunch of grocery store flowers against the headstone, the same kind his mother used to buy for the kitchen table on the rare weeks she had a few extra dollars. Then he drove to Walmart. He never bought much. Sometimes just a cup of coffee from the deli counter, or a paperback from the discount rack near the entrance. The point was not the purchase. The point was the walk down the cereal aisle, past the pharmacy section, through the cleaning supplies. The point was to remember what the linoleum looked like under fluorescent light, and what it felt like to be a boy trailing behind a woman who checked every price tag twice. He had been standing in the checkout line for less than 2 minutes when he noticed the woman in front of him begin to pull out the bags of coins. He watched without expression as the cashier, a young man with the patient practiced stillness of someone who had seen this before, began separating the coins into counts. The people behind Nathaniel shuffled. A woman 2 spots back made a sound that was not quite a sigh and not quite a word. Claire did not look up. Her jaw was set. Her hands, Nathaniel noticed, were shaking slightly, but she was controlling them the way people control things they have had a long time to practice controlling. He looked down at the conveyor belt. The items were arranged with a kind of unconscious precision that told a complete story. The cereal was a store-brand bag, not a box. The bread was the loaf on sale. The peanut butter was the large jar, the one that lasted longer. The apples were loose, weighed the cheapest variety. The children's cough syrup was the generic version. The socks were the multi-pack. The composition notebook had a bent cover, possibly a return. The box of crayons was the 16 count, not the 64, and there was nothing else. Nathaniel stood very still and looked at that belt for a long moment. No shampoo, no pain reliever, no snack, no drink, no small indulgence of any kind for the adult in the transaction. Every item on that belt was calibrated to the needs of children. The woman buying them had removed herself from the equation entirely. The total came up $3.40 short. Claire's hand moved toward the crayons. Before she could pick them up, the boy beside her, small, wearing a jacket with a fraying sleeve, put his hand on her arm. He spoke in a voice low enough that Nathaniel almost did not catch it. "It's okay, Mom. I don't need them." The words hit Nathaniel somewhere behind the sternum. He had said those words. Not those exact words, but words that meant the same thing, in this same store, to a woman who had the same expression Claire Bennett was wearing right now, that particular combination of gratitude and grief that mothers wear when their children try to protect them from the truth of their own circumstances. Evelyn had never let him give back the thing she had already decided he would have. She would find a way. She always found a way. And then she died at 59, having never once bought herself the winter coat she needed, because there had always been something more important. Nathaniel set his box of oatmeal on the belt. He told the cashier to run it all together. Claire turned around fast. "No." Her voice was quiet, but the word was not. "Thank you, but no. I don't need that. Nathaniel did not pull his hand back from the card reader. He also did not introduce himself, did not reach for his wallet in a way that made a show of its thickness, did not offer the kind of smile that wealthy people sometimes offered when they wanted credit for generosity. He simply looked at her and said in an even voice, "My mother used to buy that same cereal. She'd come to this store every 2 weeks. She always bought everything for me and never bought anything for herself." Claire stared at him. He was not what she had expected. He was not young, not flashy, not wearing anything that announced money. The jacket was worn at the cuffs. He looked tired in a way she recognized, not from lack of sleep, but from carrying something for a long time. "That's not the same thing," she said. "I know," he said. "I'm not saying it is." The cashier glanced between them with the diplomatic neutrality of a man who had learned not to have opinions. The people behind them had gone quiet in the particular way that people go quiet when they realize something real is happening. Claire looked at her children. Oliver was watching with careful eyes. Lily was holding the sleeve of her mother's coat and studying the man with open, unguarded curiosity. Claire looked back at Nathaniel. She gave a single, short nod. She did not say thank you. She picked up her bags, took both children by the hand, and walked toward the exit without looking back. Nathaniel paid, collected his oatmeal, and followed, at the ordinary pace of someone who was not following anyone. The parking lot was wide and gray under an overcast sky. He saw her at a dark green compact car near the cart return, loading the bags into the trunk with the efficient movements of someone accustomed to doing everything quickly. Oliver was helping. Lily was sitting on the edge of the trunk, swinging her legs. Nathaniel slowed without stopping. He heard Oliver ask, in the carrying voice of an 8-year-old who did not yet know to modulate for distance, "Mom, are you going to eat when we get home?" Claire closed the trunk. She turned and crouched down to Oliver's level and smoothed his hair back from his forehead with one hand. Her voice, when she answered, was warm and easy and completely convincing. "I already ate, baby. You go ahead." Nathaniel stopped walking. The cart return was 6 feet away. He stood beside it and did not move for a moment that lasted considerably longer than it should have. The gray sky pressed down on the parking lot. A cart rolled loose from the return and bumped slowly against the concrete divider. Somewhere behind him, a car door shut. "I already ate." His mother had said it with the same tone, the same warmth, the same complete, practiced conviction. She had said it so many times that for years he had believed her. He was 12 years old before he understood that she was lying. He was 30 before he understood what the lying had cost her, not just the food, but the cumulative weight of erasing herself meal by meal, year by year, until the habit of self-erasure became indistinguishable from who she was. Evelyn Mercer had given everything she had to one person, and that person was now standing in a parking lot watching another woman do the same thing. He could get in his car. He could drive back to the 31st floor and the lakeside house and the life he had built in his mother's memory and in his own guilt and in the strange compound of both. He had done it every other October 14th. Or he could decide that being a witness was not the same thing as being helpless. He looked at the green car until it pulled out of the lot and turned left onto the main road. Then he took out his phone and called Marin. He had caught a glimpse of Claire's name on the cashier's screen when her debit card was declined just enough. It was all he needed. Marin Ellis had worked for Nathaniel for 11 years and had learned to parse his requests by what he did not say as much as what he did. When he called her from a Walmart parking lot on October 14th and asked her to find background information on a woman named Claire Bennett, Columbus area, approximate age, early 30s, 2 children, She did not ask why. She said she would be careful and discreet, and she was. Within 48 hours, Marin had assembled a picture that was neither dramatic nor unusual, which somehow made it worse. Claire Bennett had enrolled in the nursing program at Columbus State 4 years ago, with a GPA that placed her in the top 15% of her cohort. She had withdrawn in her 3rd year. Public records showed a divorce filing, a change of address to a smaller unit across town, and a series of small claims actions against a Derek Bennett for unpaid child support. 3 filings, 3 judgments in Claire's favor. 0 collected. She was currently employed, part-time, at a chiropractic office on Broad Street. Her lease was month to month. Oliver attended a public elementary school 2 miles from their apartment. Lily had been treated twice in the past year at Nationwide Children's Hospital. Once for bronchitis, once for a respiratory infection. Nathaniel read the summary twice. He folded it and set it on the passenger seat. A week later, he went back to Walmart. He told himself he had not planned it. He needed oatmeal. He was in the neighborhood. These were not untrue statements, but they were not the complete truth either, and Nathaniel was honest enough with himself to know the difference. He took a basket and walked toward the dairy section at a pace that suggested he had nowhere specific to be. He heard Oliver before he saw them. "Mom, is this one better or this one?" Claire was standing in front of the milk refrigerators, holding 2 jugs, a half-gallon and a full gallon, with the focused expression of someone doing arithmetic in their head. She was wearing a brown coat that was too light for the October air. She looked like someone who had not sat down in several days. Oliver turned and saw him first. The boy's face went through a rapid sequence of recognition and conclusion before he pointed and said without any self-consciousness whatsoever, "Mom, it's the cereal guy!" Claire turned. For a moment, she simply looked at him. Then something shifted in her expression, not warmth exactly, but a lowering of active resistance. "Of course it is," she said mostly to herself. "I need milk," Nathaniel said. This was true. "We all need milk," Oliver said with the philosophical authority of an 8-year-old. Lily, from her position in the cart seat, studied Nathaniel with large, serious eyes, and then held out a small plastic figure of a horse, apparently as an offering, or a test. Nathaniel accepted it with both hands. Lily seemed satisfied. Claire pressed her mouth together in a way that was almost a smile. He asked if he could buy them lunch at the diner next door. The small one, the kind with laminated menus and coffee that came in ceramic mugs. Not a restaurant, he clarified, just the diner. Claire said no, politely, but without hesitation. He waited. Oliver looked up at his mother with an expression of careful neutrality that was far too sophisticated for his age, and said nothing. Which said everything. Lily was still watching Nathaniel with the horse. Claire exhaled. 30 minutes, she said. The kids have homework. At the diner, Claire ordered coffee. When the server came back, Nathaniel ordered coffee as well, and then said without looking at the menu, "And the soup and sandwich for the table, please." He said it in the tone of someone placing an ordinary order, not making a gesture. Claire looked at him. "My mother used to say she already ate," he said quietly. "She said it every day for 15 years. When I was old enough to understand what it meant, she was already gone." He slid the soup toward her side of the table. She did not push it back. The diner was warm and smelled like coffee and fried bread. Lily had fallen asleep against Claire's arm 20 minutes in, her small face slack and trusting, one hand still loosely holding the plastic horse she had refused to return to Nathaniel. Oliver was working through a grilled cheese with the methodical focus of a child who had learned not to take food for granted. Claire wrapped both hands around her mug and looked out the window at the parking lot. "You don't have to keep doing this," she said. Not unkindly, more like a statement of fact she wanted on the record. I know, Nathaniel said. I'm not a project. I know that too. She looked at him then, a direct, measuring look that he suspected she used on people who were trying to manage her. He held it without flinching. After a moment, she seemed to decide something and looked back at the window. I was going to be a community nurse, she said. It came out quietly, the way people say things they have not said in a long time. Not hospital. The kind that goes into homes in underserved neighborhoods, catches things early, builds relationships with families who don't trust the system enough to walk into a clinic. She paused. I had 1 semester left of my core requirements when everything fell apart. Nathaniel said nothing. He had learned a long time ago that silence offered correctly was more useful than questions. I don't say that as a complaint, Claire added quickly. Oliver and Lily are not a complication. They are the whole point. She stopped. She turned her mug slowly on the table. I had a direction, and then I didn't. What would it take to go back? She gave him a short, tired laugh. Time, money, childcare, someone to help Oliver with homework on the nights I'm not home. A miracle of scheduling. She shook her head. It's not one thing, it's everything at once. Nathaniel nodded slowly. That evening he called Marin. What Marin found was not a miracle. It was a collection of programs that already existed, had existed for years, quietly available to people in exactly Claire's situation. A scholarship fund through the Ohio Nurses Foundation, specifically for women re-entering nursing programs after family disruptions. An after-school program at Oliver's school with open enrollment. A subsidized child care assistance program through the county. A food support initiative at a community health center 4 blocks from Claire's apartment. A nonprofit housing assistance program with a current wait list, but active intake. None of it was hidden. It was all public. All accessible, all sitting in databases and brochures and websites that required knowing the right search terms and having the time and bandwidth to look. Claire had neither. She had been working and parenting and surviving in that order, with nothing left over for research. Nathaniel sat with that for a long time. He thought about all the systems he had built in his professional life. The logistics networks, the supply chains, the routing algorithms that moved freight from one point to another with maximum efficiency. The problem with poverty, he was beginning to understand, in a way that was different from how he had understood it before, was not always a shortage of resources. Sometimes it was a routing failure. The resources existed. The people who needed them simply had no map. He met Claire for coffee again the following week. Her suggestion this time, at a place near her office during her lunch break. He brought a folder. He set it on the table and explained what Marin had found, item by item, without pressure and without framing it as a gift. He told her what she qualified for, what the application processes looked like, and what the realistic timelines were. Claire listened with her arms crossed and her expression carefully neutral. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. This is real, she said finally. It was not a question, but it had the texture of one. All of it, he said. Marin checked twice. Claire looked down at the folder. She opened the top page, read the first paragraph of the scholarship description, and closed it again. She pressed her palm flat against the cover. If I take this, she said slowly, I need it to be mine. Not something you arranged, not something I owe you for. The scholarship is through a foundation that's been running for 9 years, Nathaniel said. I didn't create it. I'm just telling you it exists. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she picked up the folder. Okay, she said. I'll look at it tonight. Claire submitted the scholarship application on a Tuesday night, after both children were asleep. She sat at the kitchen table with the folder open beside her laptop, filled out every field carefully, and attached the transcript that showed her grades from Columbus State. Grades she had not looked at in 3 years, because looking at them had felt like reading a letter from someone she used to be. When she hit submit, she closed the laptop and sat in the quiet of the apartment for a few minutes before going to bed. 2 weeks later, she was accepted. The program allowed her to re-enroll part-time, completing her remaining requirements over 3 semesters with evening classes twice a week. The scholarship covered tuition and fees. The county child care assistance covered Lily's evenings. Oliver's after-school enrollment came through the same week, which meant he would have supervised homework time and dinner at the school community center on the nights Claire had class. Margaret Keene, the retired teacher who lived in the apartment directly above theirs and had known the family since they moved in, offered to be Claire's backup for any night the other arrangements fell through. She made this offer over a plate of cookies, and in a tone that suggested she had been waiting to be asked. Claire had not asked. Margaret had simply decided. It was the kind of thing that made Claire have to look away for a moment and pretend she was reading something. The first month was hard. The second month was harder. Claire worked her part-time hours, attended class twice a week, managed Oliver's school calendar and Lily's follow-up appointments, communicated with Margaret about scheduling, and somewhere in between tried to keep the apartment functional and the refrigerator stocked. She was moving through her days at full capacity, with no margin for error. The kind of fatigue that settled into the bones and did not lift with sleep alone. But something else was happening too. In her nursing classes, she was not starting over. She was continuing. The knowledge had not left her. It had only been waiting. Her instructors noticed. Her study group, which she had joined reluctantly in the second week, was made up of 4 other women in various stages of re-entry. Patricia, who had left school to care for her aging mother, Donna, who had spent 6 years out of the workforce after a difficult pregnancy, and 2 others whose reasons were their own. They met on Thursday evenings after class at a coffee shop that stayed open late, spread their notes across 2 pushed-together tables, and worked through the material together. They also, over time, began bringing food to share, trading information about resources they had found, and checking in on each other's children by name. Claire had not expected that part. She had expected to study. She had not expected to be seen. In late November, Nathaniel's phone rang at 11:30 on a Wednesday night. He was still at his desk. He answered on the second ring. Claire's voice was flat, in the way that voices go flat when a person is holding themselves together by effort alone. She told him that Lily had been admitted to Nationwide Children's that afternoon with a high fever that had not responded to the first round of medication. She told him she had missed her shift and would lose the day's pay. She told him she had an exam in 6 days and had not opened her notes since Monday. She told him that her landlord had sent a notice that morning, informing tenants of a rent increase, effective January 1st. She told him all of this in a steady, sequential voice, and then she stopped. Then in a different voice, smaller, without the steadiness, she said, "And Derek called. He saw something online about me going back to school, and he called to tell me I was being selfish, that I was chasing something that was never going to happen, that some people just aren't meant to." She stopped again. The line was quiet. "I'm sorry," she said. "I don't know why I called you." Nathaniel set down his pen. "Because you needed to tell someone who wasn't going to agree with him," he said. There was a long pause. "Lily's fever broke an hour ago," Claire said. "The doctor says she can probably go home tomorrow." "Good," he said. "Get some sleep. I'll call you in the morning." He did not tell her everything was going to be fine. He had too much respect for her to say something they both knew was not a promise he could make. Lily came home the next afternoon with a prescription. a hospital bracelet she refused to let anyone cut off, and the particular clingy sweetness of a sick child who had been frightened. Claire carried her from the car to the apartment, settled her on the couch with a blanket and the small stuffed rabbit that lived on her bed, and then stood in the kitchen and looked at the stack of things on the table. The rent increase notice, her nursing textbook open to a chapter she had not finished, Oliver's permission slip for a school field trip that needed to be returned with $4, and her exam schedule printed on a sheet of paper she had folded and unfolded so many times the creases had gone soft. She made dinner. She gave Lily her medication. She helped Oliver with his reading assignment. She did 2 loads of laundry because Lily had gone through 3 sets of pajamas in the hospital and the hamper could not wait. She checked the time at 9:15 and sat down at the table with her textbook and read the same paragraph 4 times without retaining a word of it. At 10:40 she closed the book. She did not open it again. The call came from Derek the following evening, which was the worst possible timing. Which was also, Claire had come to understand simply how Derek operated. He had a talent for arriving at the exact moment when her defenses were lowest. He did not ask about Lily. He had apparently seen a post from one of Claire's classmates on social media that mentioned her name in the context of the nursing program. He was calling, he said, to offer some perspective. His perspective was as follows. Claire was 31 years old, with 2 kids and a part-time job. She had already tried school, and it had not worked. She was not the kind of person who finished things. She was chasing a version of herself that did not exist, and the people encouraging her, he used the word people with a particular inflection that made its target clear, were not living her life and would not be there when it fell apart. The kids needed stability, not a mother who was never home. He spoke for 4 minutes without pausing. Claire held the phone and listened without speaking. When he finished, she said, "Goodbye, Derek," and ended the call. Then she sat down on the kitchen floor. She was not sure how long she sat there. The linoleum was cold. Oliver's backpack was by the door. Through the hallway she could hear Lily's quiet breathing from the bedroom, the particular rhythm of a child in deep sleep. The apartment was very still. She thought about the paragraph she could not retain. She thought about the rent notice. She thought about the $4 for the field trip and the prescription copay, and the fact that she had eaten a granola bar for dinner 2 nights in a row because there had not been time for anything else. She thought about how tired she was. Not the tired that sleep fixed. The other kind. At 11:15 she called Nathaniel. He answered on the second ring. She told him about the exam and the rent and Derek's call. She told him about the paragraph she could not read. And then she said the thing she had been holding back for weeks, the thing she had refused to say out loud, because saying it out loud would make it real. I don't think I can do this. I can't be a mother and a student and an employee and still have anything left over. I can't keep doing all of it, and I don't know which one to put down. But I know which one I will put down, because I always put down the same one. Her voice was very quiet. I'll put down the one that's mine. The line was silent for a moment. Don't make any decisions tonight, Nathaniel said. His voice was steady, not calm in the way of someone unaffected, but calm in the way of someone who had decided to be a fixed point because the situation required one. Just tonight. Can you do that? Claire leaned her head back against the cabinet. I don't know, she said honestly. That's okay, he said. I'll still be here in the morning. Nathaniel did not sleep. He sat at his desk until 2 in the morning, then moved to the chair by the window that looked out over the city, and sat there until the sky began to lighten at the edges. He was not working. He was thinking, which was something he had spent most of his adult life trying to avoid by filling every available hour with work. The thing he was thinking about was this: he had been watching Claire Bennett, the way he had spent 30 years watching the space where his mother used to be. He had been looking for Evelyn in the set of her shoulders, in the way she said, "I already ate," in the particular silence she kept around her own needs. And he had found enough of her there to feel for the first time in a long time like he was doing something that mattered. But Claire was not Evelyn. Evelyn was gone, and no amount of scholarship referrals or late-night phone calls would change that. His mother had died in a small apartment with a space heater that rattled, and a winter coat she had worn for 11 years because she had never gotten around to replacing it. She had died before he could give her anything. That was the fact he had been carrying since he was 32 years old, and it had shaped every decision he had made since, what he built, what he avoided, and now, apparently, who he had been trying to turn into her. If he kept doing that, he would fail Claire, in a different way than Derek had failed her, but fail her nonetheless. He would make her into a cause. He would make her into a debt he was paying to a dead woman. And Claire Bennett, who had applied for a scholarship on her own initiative and studied pharmacology after midnight and built a study group out of strangers and asked for nothing she had not earned, deserved better than to be someone else's redemption. He needed to be useful without making her the object of his grief. The distinction mattered. He was not certain he had been respecting it. Claire spent the following day in the particular fog of someone who has made no decision, which is itself a kind of decision. She took Lily to her follow-up appointment. She picked up Oliver from the after-school program. She made pasta for dinner and sat at the table while her children ate and talked and filled every corner of the room the way they always did. She watched them and felt the familiar pull of it, the way their needs were so immediate and physical and present that it was genuinely impossible to think about anything else while they were awake. She had built her entire life around that pull. She had organized herself in its direction so completely that the idea of having a direction of her own felt, on certain nights, like a foreign language she was no longer fluent in. But Oliver, setting his fork down with the deliberateness he reserved for things he had been thinking about for a while, looked at her and said, "Are you okay, Mom? You look like you're doing the thing." "What thing?" she asked. "The thing where you decide to stop wanting something so we don't feel bad." Claire looked at her 8-year-old son. He looked back at her with his father's eyes and his grandmother's patience, and something that was entirely his own, a perceptiveness that had been sharpened by years of watching his mother navigate a world that did not make it easy for her. She opened her mouth to say she was fine. The words were already formed. She knew exactly how they would sound. She closed her mouth again. She put him to bed an hour later. She sat with Lily until she fell asleep. Then she went back to the kitchen, opened her textbook, and read the paragraph that had defeated her 2 nights ago. This time she read it through. Then she read the next one. She did not know yet whether she could do all of it. She still did not know which thing she would put down when something had to give. But she understood sitting at that table at 11 o'clock at night with her nursing textbook and a cup of tea that had gone cold, that she was not going to make that decision from the kitchen floor. She was going to make it standing up. Nathaniel called the next morning at 8:15, as he had said he would. Claire answered on the 3rd ring. She was making lunches. He could hear the background sounds of a morning with children, a cartoon at low volume, a drawer opening and closing, Lily saying something insistent about the color of her cup. "How are you?" he asked. "I read the chapter," she said. He understood what that meant. "Good," he said. There was a brief pause, and then Claire said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to just listen and not fix it." "Okay." "I've been thinking about how this started," she said. And I think you've been very kind, and I think some of it has been about me, but I think some of it has been about your mother. And I understand that, I do. But I need you to see me, not her. Me. Her voice was steady. Because if this is going to keep being something, whatever it is, it has to be built on that, or it doesn't work. Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. You're right, he said. I've been thinking the same thing. Okay, Claire said. There was a slight shift in her voice. Not relief exactly, but the sound of a door that had been braced being allowed to rest. Then we can keep talking. He did not write her a check. He did not call in favors or restructure her circumstances from above. What he did over the following weeks was sit across from her with a legal pad and work through every practical obstacle the way he would work through a logistics problem, methodically, without drama, treating her as the decision-maker at every step. He connected her with a family law attorney through a pro bono referral network. Not someone he employed, not a personal favor, but a legitimate resource she could access independently. The attorney reopened the child support enforcement case against Derek and pursued wage garnishment, which produced results that 3 previous judgments in Claire's favor had not. The first payment arrived 6 weeks later. It was not large, but it was real. And it arrived without Claire having to ask Derek for anything. He also had Marin look into the housing assistance wait list Claire was on. The wait list was long, but there was a separate program through the county for working single parents in job training or education. Claire qualified, and her application had never been cross-referenced with that program because the intake forms did not ask the right questions. A single referral moved her timeline from 3 years to under 8 months. None of this required Nathaniel's money. It required someone with time, contacts, and familiarity with how systems worked. Things Claire did not have, and he did. He also quietly funded a new initiative through the Mercer Family Foundation, a network of community navigators, trained volunteers embedded in social service offices, libraries, and community health centers across Franklin County, whose sole function was to sit with people like Claire and help them find the resources they already qualified for, but had no way to reach. The program was built on the understanding that the gap between poverty and stability was often not money. It was information and time, and someone willing to help translate a complicated system into a legible map. He did not announce it publicly. He did not attach his name to the press release. Claire passed her pharmacology exam with an 89. She called Nathaniel when she got the grade, and he could hear in her voice something that had not been there in October. Not happiness exactly, but a kind of solidity, the sound of a person who had stopped bracing for the floor to give way. She told him about Patricia from her study group, whose mother had recently been discharged from a rehabilitation facility with no follow-up care plan, and how Claire had spent a Sunday afternoon helping her navigate the appeals process for home health coverage. She had known exactly which forms to file. That's what I want to do, Claire said. Not just the clinical part, that part. Knowing the system well enough to help people find their way through it. Nathaniel looked out his office window at the city below. 40 minutes south of where he was sitting, a woman who had stood in a Walmart checkout line with 3 bags of coins was telling him who she intended to become. I know, he said. Did you already know, or are you just saying that? Both, he said. She laughed, a real one, brief and unguarded. He had not heard her laugh before. It was a good sound. Spring came to Columbus the way it always did. Reluctantly, in fits, with cold mornings that smelled like mud, and afternoons that briefly convinced everyone the worst was over. Claire noticed it more than usual that year. She noticed the light changing on her walk from the parking lot to the nursing building. She noticed the way Oliver stopped needing his heavy coat somewhere around the third week of March, and the way Lily started collecting small rocks from the sidewalk and lining them up on the windowsill by the front door, which was something she did every year when the weather turned, and which Claire had always found quietly wonderful. She was tired. She was still tired, the kind that would probably not fully lift until the children were older and the schedule loosened, and she had lived for a sustained period of time without a list of things that had to be done before she could sleep. But it was a different quality of tired now. It was the tired of someone moving toward something, rather than simply holding ground. She had 2 semesters left. On a Saturday in late April, Claire took Oliver and Lily to Walmart. This was not unusual. They went most weekends for groceries. Oliver pushed the cart now, which he took seriously. Lily sat in the front seat and issued opinions on everything they passed with the authority of someone whose judgment she believed to be both final and correct. Claire worked through her list with the focused efficiency she had developed over 3 years of grocery shopping on a budget, checking unit prices, comparing weights, making small adjustments in real time. They moved through the produce section, the bread aisle, the cereal aisle. Oliver chose the store brand oatmeal without being asked. Lily held 2 apples up to her ears like earrings and waited for a reaction. At the end of the clothing section, Claire stopped. There was a rack of sale items along the wall, end-of-season coats reduced to clear. One of them was a dark green quilted jacket in her size, marked down to $22. She had walked past a version of this rack in this store a dozen times. She had always kept moving. She reached out and touched the sleeve. It was warm. It was the right size. $22 was not nothing, but it was not impossible either. Not anymore. Not with the child support coming in, and the rent assistance processed, and the scholarship covering what it covered. She could afford $22 for a coat that was not a luxury, but was also undeniably for her. She stood there for a moment. Oliver, who had brought the cart to a stop beside her without being told, looked at the jacket. He looked at his mother. He said in the careful, deliberate voice he used when he was saying something he had thought about, "Mom, you need something for you." Claire looked at her son. He was 8 years old, and he was wearing a jacket with a fraying sleeve, and he was looking at her with an expression that was equal parts love and impatience. The expression of someone who had been waiting a long time for her to do this particular thing. She took the jacket off the rack and put it in the cart. Lily clapped. Nathaniel was in the same store. He had not planned it, or rather, he had told himself he had not planned it, and had almost believed it, until he found himself in the cereal aisle on a Saturday morning with no particular list and a basket containing only a box of oatmeal he did not need. Some habits were harder to examine than to keep. He saw them from across the store through a gap between 2 display racks. He saw Claire standing at the sale rack with her hand on a jacket sleeve. He saw Oliver watching her. He saw her take the jacket and place it in the cart. He did not move toward them. He stood where he was, holding his basket, and watched the 3 of them continue down the aisle. Oliver steering the cart with both hands, Lily narrating something from her seat, Claire checking her phone against her list with one hand and resting the other on the cart's handle next to her son's. The green jacket was folded over the cart's sidebar. Nathaniel stood very still in the cereal aisle of a Walmart in Columbus, Ohio, and felt something in his chest that he did not have a precise word for, something that was the opposite of the frozen, airless feeling he had carried for 14 years. Not happiness, not exactly. Something quieter. Something that felt like a particular kind of release, the kind that comes not from being forgiven, but from watching a thing you could not undo stop defining everything that comes after. A loop had been broken. Not repaired. You could not repair what had happened. To Evelyn could not give her back the coat, or the meal, or the years. But the pattern had been interrupted. One woman had put something in her cart for herself, and her son had watched her do it. And now he knew that was something mothers were allowed to do. That was not nothing. That was, in fact, everything. There is a kind of strength that doesn't announce itself. It shows up in grocery lists counted out the night before, in textbooks opened at 11 o'clock when the kids are finally asleep, in the quiet decision to put something in the cart for yourself after years of reaching past it. Claire's story isn't about being rescued. It's about being seen long enough, steadily enough, that she could finally see herself again. And Oliver, watching his mother take that jacket off the rack and put it in the cart, that moment matters. Because children learn what love looks like from the people who raise them. When a mother finally takes up space for herself, she gives her children permission to do the same. If this story meant something to you, we'd be grateful if you subscribe to the channel. Every week we bring you stories like this one. Quiet, human, and true to the way real life actually feels. No easy answers, no shortcuts. Just people finding their footing, one small decision at a time. We'd love for you to be part of that.